How to learn to think positively to attract wealth. Napoleon Hill. Nobody told you this, but perhaps the greatest enemy of your prosperity isn't the government, the economy, your salary, or a lack of opportunity. It's right there inside, hidden in the way you think. And the most curious thing? It's not your fault. You were trained from a young age to believe that wealth is a privilege of the few, that positive thinking is for naive people, and that a good financial life isn't for everyone. But what if all of that were exactly the opposite of what really works? Imagine the impact of discovering that there's a kind of mental switch that, when turned on, makes your mind stop repelling money and start attracting it naturally. Sounds like an exaggeration? Well, that's exactly what Napoleon Hill studied for decades and what modern neuroscience confirms. The truth is simple and uncomfortable. You don't attract what you want. You attract what you think. And sometimes, without even realizing it, you spend the day creating vibrations that drain your prosperity without you lifting a finger. And here's a counterintuitive statement. Positive thinking isn't cheap optimism. It's not closing your eyes to reality. It's not mental peace and love. It's a scientific discipline, a strategic reprogramming, a tool used by billionaires, visionaries, Olympic athletes, and spiritual leaders for centuries. While many believe that improving your life starts with money, those who truly prosper know it starts in the mind. And before you think, "This doesn't work for me," let me tell you something. It does work, and you've proven it many times. Every time you sabotaged yourself, every time you doubted yourself, every time you felt small, your mind created exactly what you feared. Now imagine what would happen if it started creating what you desire, not what you fear. That's exactly what you're going to learn today. Because if there's ever a perfect time to turn the mental key to your financial life around, it's now. And what comes next might be the missing piece you need to finally discover why so many people thrive, and why you haven't yet thrived the way you should. The invisible force that repels money. How thought directs financial reality. He realizes early on that it's not bad luck. It's his mind working against him. You know when someone works hard and yet money seems to slip through their fingers? Well, it's not mysticism, it's mindset. Scarcity mindsets create micro-decisions that sabotage, postponing investments, accepting any offer, saying no way by default. It's like driving with the handbrake on. Changing the mental script is the real game changer. In practice, it works like this. When he thinks, "There's never enough left over," he buys impulsively to relieve anxiety. When he thinks, "I decide the fate of my money," he plans first, spends later. Small rituals seal this turnaround. Reviewing expenses every Monday, investing every 5th of the month, and writing a prosperity declaration stuck to the mirror. It's not motivational talk, it's financial mental hygiene, by the book. And curiously, his wallet follows suit. A practical example? He chooses 3 scarcity phrases he heard in childhood. Money is hard to come by. Rich people are no good. That's not for us. And writes clear antidotes. I create income with creativity. Wealth reveals its best qualities when it serves a purpose. I have access and preparation. Then he anchors it in simple actions. Opening an account with a reliable brokerage firm, building a 6-month reserve, automating investments in broad ETFs, such as BOVA Levad IVVB11, and practicing saying no to purposeless purchases. It seems like little, but it's the gateway to something bigger that comes next. The scientific method, neuroscience plus Bible, that transforms thought into material reality. He didn't realize that his mind functioned like a silent laboratory, where every thought is an experiment shaping his financial reality. Neuroscience calls this neuroplasticity. The Bible calls it, "As he thinks in his heart, so is he." 2 different worlds pointing to the same truth. Thought is not just a reflection, It's a creator. And when he understood this, he realized he was sowing storms and expecting to reap calm. But deep down, everything obeyed a pattern that he himself was feeding. The most curious thing is that the brain doesn't know how to differentiate between imagination and real experience. When it clearly visualizes prosperity, its nervous system registers it as a future memory, not as a childhood dream. That's why Olympic athletes train mentally before the competition. The body responds to the rehearsal as if it were reality. In the same way, someone who visualizes debt all the time creates micro-actions that confirm this scenario. On the other hand, someone who visualizes abundance creates mental space for opportunities that were previously invisible. And that's where the spiritual side of the story comes in. He realizes that God never asked humankind to hope for things to work out. He asked them to believe before they see. Mark 11:24 doesn't speak of vague hope, it speaks of mental certainty. It's almost as if faith were an advanced software that communicates directly with the subconscious, aligning belief and action. And when that happens, the external world begins to respond. Not by magic, but by coherence between mind, emotion, and behavior. A practical example? He begins training his brain with a simple exercise. Every day, upon waking, he spends 3 minutes visualizing his ideal financial life: organized accounts, growing investments, conscious purchases, without that end-of-month anxiety. Then he writes a guiding phrase in the present tense, something like, "I manage my wealth wisely and securely." This small ritual creates a neural pathway that strengthens daily, just as a muscle grows with repetition. And of course, it opens the door to bolder actions, such as studying real estate investment trusts, more strategic fixed income investments, and creating new income streams. But the most interesting part is that, when he starts practicing this, he realizes it's not just about thinking positively, it's about thinking correctly. It's about speaking to the mind in a language it understands: image, emotion, and repetition. And when this triad aligns, life begins to show signs that something bigger is being unlocked. However, this method only truly works when he confronts the next point, the one that reveals the hidden enemy that sabotages everything before it even begins. The impact of negative thoughts as frequencies that shape financial outcomes. He always thought negative thoughts were just thoughts, things that come and go without much impact. But when he began to observe his own life, he noticed a strange pattern. Every time he wallowed in worry, insecurity, or fear, his financial decisions worsened. It was as if these feelings sent a silent signal to the world, attracting exactly what he wanted to avoid. And suddenly, the phrase, "you reap what you sow," took on a much more literal meaning. The truth is that each repeated thought acts like a radio pole emitting vibrations. Thinking about scarcity lowers the emotional frequency and puts the brain into survival mode. The consequence? It makes impulsive decisions, pays more than it should, avoids opportunities that could change its game, and sees risks where there are possibilities. But when it thinks about abundance, the brain changes gears. It begins to notice paths, solutions, and movements that were previously hidden. To make this a reality, he began measuring his own daily vibration. Every morning he wrote down 3 recurring thoughts about money. Phrases like, "I'll run out," "It's impossible," and "This isn't for me," were common. Then he did a simple exercise, immediately replacing each negative thought with a constructive one. For example, he would replace "I can't save anything" with "I set aside money first, then spend it." And he used practical actions to reinforce this new vibration, such as automating investments or creating a 24-hour rule before emotional purchases. The most curious thing is that, by changing this frequency, life seems to start responding. He finds clients unexpectedly, receives proposals that didn't appear before, closes deals that were stalled. This doesn't happen by chance, but because his new mindset puts him in a position of action. not defense. Just as an adjusted antenna picks up new signals, an adjusted mind picks up opportunities that have always existed, but were clouded by layers of fear and doubt. And even noticing this change, he understands that negative thoughts don't just arise out of nowhere. They have deep roots, planted years ago, perhaps even before he was born. They are inherited beliefs, old memories, psychological traits that operate in the shadows. And it is precisely here that the next point begins. The one that exposes the true silent saboteur that lives within the mind and influences every financial decision without him realizing it. Inherited beliefs and the financial shadow that sabotage prosperity. He grew up hearing phrases that seemed innocent, but which took deep root. Money doesn't grow on trees. Those born poor die poor. Better a little with security. Without realizing it, these words became invisible bricks building a mental ceiling. And this ceiling limited how much he believed he could earn, grow, change. Psychology calls this the financial shadow, that part of the mind that absorbs beliefs without filters and, years later, dictates automatic behaviors. It's like carrying an old software running in the background without knowing it exists. Over time, he began to notice strange patterns. Whenever life started to improve, a sudden fear of losing everything would arise. Or, when he received extra money, he would spend it too quickly, as if he couldn't hold on to it. These behaviors weren't a lack of discipline, but old programs inherited from parents, grandparents, and even great-grandparents who had faced real difficulties. His mind, trying to protect him, repeated patterns that once made sense, but which were now invisible prisons. And that's when he understood that freeing himself required illuminating that shadow. To confront this, he began a simple yet transformative exercise, listing the phrases about money he heard most often in childhood. Then he asked himself, is this true or just repetition? Often it was just repetition. So he replaced each old belief with a new belief aligned with prosperity. If before he thought, wealth is dangerous, now he wrote, wealth amplifies my impact. If his family said, we are poor, that's just how it is, he mentally replied, I begin a new cycle here. It's impressive how this reframing changes behavior almost immediately. The process continued as he observed daily decisions influenced by this shadow. For example, when he avoided opportunities because he thought they weren't for him, he began to act in the exact opposite direction. He studied investments, participated in growth groups, and surrounded himself with people who thought big. Small gestures, like reading The Richest Man in Babylon or Think and Grow Rich, reinforced the new financial identity he was building. It wasn't about getting rich overnight, but about reprogramming the identity that would guide all his actions. And even as he progressed, he soon realized that inherited mindsets aren't the only enemies. There's another mechanism deeply ingrained in his biology that reinforces the focus on scarcity. A mechanism as old as humankind, which still automatically influences financial decisions today. And it's precisely this primitive mechanism that he needs to understand before truly taking the next leap. The negativity bias, the brain programmed to survive, not thrive. He always thought that thinking about the worst was just a bad habit, but he discovered it was something much deeper, a biological mechanism inherited from his ancestors. The human brain was shaped to survive in hostile environments where any carelessness could cost a life. That's why the mind still seeks dangers before seeking possibilities. It's not pessimism, it's an ancient programming. But in the modern world, this programming doesn't protect, it limits. And without realizing it, he lived trapped in this constant threat radar. This negativity bias causes the brain to register a late payment more quickly than an investment opportunity. It remembers a small loss for weeks, but forgets a significant gain the next day. When making financial decisions, this mechanism pushes it towards excessive caution, fear of risk, and the thought, What if it goes wrong? The problem is that prosperity requires precisely the opposite: vision, openness, calculated courage. And this battle between biology and ambition defines a large part of anyone's financial life. When he understood this, he realized he didn't need to fight his mind, just train it. Just as a muscle responds to the right training, the brain responds to redirection. He began practicing a simple exercise every morning, listing 3 things that were working in his financial life, no matter how small. It could be, I paid my bill on time. I invested 20 reais. I didn't spend impulsively yesterday. These small focuses broke the brain's pattern of only looking at the negative. It's like teaching an old dog to sniff out flowers instead of threats. To further reinforce this, he created a weekly routine he called expanded vision. Every Friday, he reviewed his decisions of the week and marked a single bold action he had taken. Whether it was studying a new investment, starting a side income stream, learning about REITs, or even talking to someone more experienced. Over time, this habit reprogrammed his mind to recognize progress, not danger. And the most interesting thing? When the brain gets used to registering progress, it starts to crave even greater progress. But even after training his brain to see opportunities, he soon realized that simply thinking differently wasn't enough. He needed to nourish his mind with content that would feed this new identity. In other words, the mental environment around him needed to change, because no mind thrives in isolation. And it is precisely about this change of environment, and how it can accelerate or destroy your prosperity, that the next topic delves into. The biblical command to train focus. Think about what builds up, prospers, and expands. He always imagined that positive thinking was just motivational advice, the kind you find on pharmacy cards. But when he read Philippians 4:8 carefully, he realized it wasn't a suggestion. It was a command. Think about these things. Strong, direct, non-negotiable. The Bible doesn't say, try to think about it. Think about it when you have time. Think about it when you're in a good mood. It says, think about what is true, right, pure, and lovely. In other words, train your mind to focus on what builds up, not what destroys. This command exists because the mind, on its own, naturally slips towards the worst-case scenario. It's like a mischievous child. If no one is looking, it runs in the wrong direction. And in financial life, thinking the worst is a guaranteed recipe for paralysis. He noticed that when he nurtured uplifting thoughts, he made wiser decisions. He planned. He compared prices. He researched investments. He carefully chose who to seek advice from. But when he let fear take over, he made impulsive, overly protective, and defensive decisions. It was like driving with the headlights off. To apply this command in his daily life, he created a simple exercise. Every time a negative thought arose, he paused for 5 seconds and asked himself, does this build up or tear down? If it was tearing him down, he immediately replaced it with something that would bring him closer to the financial life he desired. For example, when he thought, I won't be able to save anything this month, he would change it to, I can start small, but I can start now, and he would take concrete action, investing $10, reviewing his budget, cutting an emotional expense. Small actions that create new neural pathways. Another habit that transformed his focus was shielding his mental environment. He began to carefully select what he consumed. He unfollowed profiles that spread economic fear. He was mindful of his conversations, and he sought out content that elevated his perspective. Texts by Napoleon Hill, excerpts from Proverbs, books like The Power of Action or The Millionaire Mind. Gradually, his mind began to operate in a cleaner, clearer, more strategic way. Because after all, it's no use planting good seeds if the soil is contaminated. And it was in this process of mental discipline that he realized something even deeper. It's not enough to just think about what builds. It's necessary to learn how to speak that which builds. Because thought creates direction, but words create command. And it is precisely in the creative power of words, and how they shape financial destiny, that the next topic delves. The power of words. Each sentence as a decree that shapes financial reality. He always talked about money without thinking about the weight of his words. He would say things like, "I'm struggling financially. Money slips through my fingers. Everything is harder for me." And he repeated these things as if describing the weather. But little by little he realized that these phrases weren't simple outbursts. They were emotional pronouncements. His mind, obedient like a programmed servant, adjusted his behavior to confirm these statements. It was like programming a GPS for the wrong destination, and then complaining that you arrived at the place you didn't want to go. When he began observing prosperous people, he noticed something curious. They had a completely different vocabulary. They didn't say, "It's impossible," but rather, "How can I make it possible?" They didn't say, "I don't have money," but rather, "It's not my priority right now." It seemed like a detail, but it changed everything. Because words, when they leave the mouth, organize thought, direct emotion, and influence action. It's as if each sentence were a brick building or tearing down the internal financial structure. To put this into practice, he created a verbal hygiene exercise. For 24 hours, he wrote down all the negative phrases he said about money. At first, he was shocked. There were so many. Then, for each destructive phrase, he created a constructive version. For example, he replaced "I'm bad with money" with "I'm learning to master my finances." He substituted "I can't invest" with "I'm starting small, but I'm starting today." And he reinforced everything with micro-actions. Investing $20, studying for 10 minutes, organizing an overdue bill. He soon discovered that words without emotion don't create transformation. Therefore, he began to affirm his new phrases with intense feeling, not like a robotic mantra, but as a declared truth. He would say aloud, looking in the mirror, "I manage money wisely. Sure." Or, "Prosperity flows to me because I act prosperously." At first it seemed strange, almost theatrical, but he soon realized that this emotional energy carried the phrases into his subconscious, where they became new commands, and new commands generate new results. But as he strengthened his speech, he noticed something even deeper. It wasn't enough to declare prosperity if his actions remained small, timid, or inconsistent. He understood that for words to gain power, they need to be aligned with attitudes that prove to the mind that he is truly committed. And it is precisely at this point, how to transform thought and word into extraordinary action that moves the universe, that the next topic delves. Extraordinary action, the principle that multiplies results and confirms intentions to the universe. He always believed that positive thinking was enough, until he realized that thought without action becomes poetry kept in a drawer. True transformation begins when he does more than what he is being paid for, when he delivers beyond the minimum, when he surprises, not others, but himself. Napoleon Hill taught that whoever does more than they are paid will be paid more than they do. And this phrase, despite its simplicity, reveals an almost mathematical law of prosperity. Extraordinary action is the fuel that activates dormant opportunities. At first, he thought extraordinary action meant working himself to exhaustion. But he realized it's not about the volume of effort, but the quality of the movement. It's sending an email that's better than expected. It's studying investments for 20 minutes a day, even when no one is asking. It's creating a small extra income on weekends. It's solving a problem before it happens. These are small gestures, but they create a trademark. He becomes someone who moves with excellence, and the universe responds to those who move. To apply this, he started a routine called Step Beyond. Every day he did one single thing that brought him closer to his ideal financial life. Negotiate a service. Cancel an unnecessary expense. Contribute a symbolic amount. Reorganize a financial drawer. Send a message to someone who could open doors. It seemed like little, but in 30 days, the accumulated result was powerful. It's like pushing a large stone. At first it barely moves, but when it gains traction, movement becomes inevitable. The most incredible thing is that when he began to act beyond expectations, strange phenomena, but familiar to those who experience this, began to occur. Ideas arose at the right time. Important people crossed his path. Opportunities that never existed before began to appear. Jung called this synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that only happen when mind, word, and action are in coherence. It's not magic, it's alignment, and this alignment creates unexpected shortcuts. But there was still one point he needed to understand deeply. Acting extraordinarily is essential, but without persistence, nothing is sustainable. He would need to learn to keep going, even when it seemed like nothing was happening. Persisting when everything is easy is simple. The challenge is to persist when nothing changes. And it is precisely about this silent test, which separates winners from quitters, that the next topic reveals in depth. Persistence, the invisible test that separates those who desire from those who achieve. He always thought he gave up because it wasn't meant for him, until he realized that the universe tests everyone before delivering anything great. Persistence isn't stubbornness. It's a sign of mental maturity. It's the silent test that differentiates those who are just playing at dreaming from those who are truly committed. And this test never comes when everything is flowing smoothly. It appears precisely when nothing seems to be happening. On the days when the account doesn't grow, when the return doesn't come, when motivation evaporates. That's where winners are molded. He began to notice this by observing successful people. They weren't the smartest, the most beautiful, or the most privileged. They were the most consistent, the ones who kept hitting the same stone until it cracked. Thomas Edison, for example, failed 10,000 times before getting the light bulb right. But Edison never saw that as failure. He saw it as data. I've discovered 10,000 ways that won't work. This mindset saved his invention. And it is precisely this vision that shapes any financial journey. Each attempt is an adjustment, not a defeat. To transform persistence into real practice, he created the 90-day commitment. He chose a single financial habit: investing daily, studying for 15 minutes, controlling expenses, and promised not to break the cycle for 3 months. The goal wasn't perfection, but consistency. On bad days, he did the bare minimum: $5 invested, 2 pages read. On good days, he did more. But he never stopped. And at the end of the 90 days, he realized something powerful. It wasn't the money that changed his mind. It was his mind that changed the money. Over time, he began to understand that persistence creates an invisible accumulation. Even when it seems like nothing is changing, something is changing. Like hitting a huge rock. In the first 99 blows, nothing happens. But on the 100th, it opens up. It wasn't the last blow that broke it. It was all of them added together. The same happens with finances. You cut expenses, invest, study, start over, and one day everything aligns. What once seemed impossible now seems obvious. Persistence transforms the improbable into the inevitable. But this inner strength doesn't stem solely from willpower. It stems from the environment in which one is immersed. And it was there that he realized that, even with all his discipline, thought, and action, he couldn't truly prosper while surrounded by people who sabotaged his vision. Some environments strengthen, others drain. And it is precisely about this power of the social circle, and how it can multiply or destroy one's prosperity, that the next topic delves into. The power of the environment. How your social circle can accelerate or destroy your prosperity. It took him a while to understand that no mind thrives in isolation. You can have discipline, you can have faith, you can have technique, but if you're surrounded by people who ridicule your goals, everything becomes heavier. The environment isn't neutral. It pulls you up or pushes you down. When he began his financial journey, he realized that whenever he talked about investments, someone would say, "Be careful, you're going to lose everything." Or worse, "Rich people are all selfish." It was like planting a seed and having someone trampling on it every day. Over time, he noticed a simple pattern. When he talked to people who thought big, he left energized. When he talked to negative people, he left exhausted. The emotional environment drained his willpower, until a mentor told him, "You become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with." That hit him hard, because looking at his life, he realized he was surrounded more by other people's fears than by visions. And nobody grows where there is only fear. Growth requires mental oxygen, new ideas, new references, new beliefs. To apply this, he created a simple social map. 2 columns. On the left, names of people who uplifted him. On the right, names of people who drained him. It wasn't judgment, it was diagnosis. With this, he began to limit his time with the right column and expand it with the left. He sought out study groups, growth communities, people who talked about the future and not about tragedy. He started following investor profiles, reading books that expanded his imagination, participating in live streams that reinforced his new identity. Every detail fine-tuned his internal frequency. And something powerful happened. When he changed his environment, his self-confidence increased. When he heard real stories of people who started from scratch, he understood that it wasn't an impossible dream. It was a method. When he interacted with those who were already a step ahead, his goals ceased to seem distant. Thriving environments create thriving mindsets, and thriving mindsets make bold, intelligent, and consistent decisions. It's like planting a tree in fertile soil. It grows effortlessly, simply because it's in the right place. But as he strengthened his mind and his circle, he realized something even more important. It was necessary that himself to become a key player in that environment. It was necessary for them to become someone capable of inspiring, of contributing, of bringing high energy, and more profoundly, it was necessary to unite their mind with others in a common purpose, a mastermind group, to amplify their creative power. And it is precisely about this union of minds and how it generates exponential results that the next topic reveals. The mastermind, the union of minds that creates an invisible force capable of multiplying results. He always believed he needed to do everything alone, until he discovered that the world's greatest winners never grow in isolation. Napoleon Hill called this mastermind, the harmonious union of 2 or more minds working towards the same purpose. This union creates a third mind, a collective intelligence that is more powerful than any individual. When he first heard this, he thought it sounded good. But he only truly understood it when he experienced it. It's as if ideas emerge faster, decisions become clearer, and obstacles become smaller. The curious thing is that this invisible force doesn't appear in ordinary environments. It only emerges when there is alignment, shared purpose, mutual respect, and high energy. When he began meeting with people who were also seeking prosperity, albeit at different levels, he felt this impulse firsthand. One friend would give an idea, another would expand on it, another would connect it with an opportunity. Suddenly, projects that seemed impossible became entirely viable. The mastermind is, literally, a destiny accelerator. To implement this, he did something simple. He chose 2 like-minded people and proposed a weekly 40-minute meeting. Each shared progress, challenges, and a small goal for the following week. The objective wasn't to compete, but to grow together. And it worked. They started exchanging books, sharing contacts, sending videos, and sharing tools. When one was discouraged, the others supported them. When one progressed, they inspired the others. It was like having a mental gym, but for prosperity. This environment completely changed the way he thought. The mind that once felt alone now felt supported. Ideas that once seemed risky now seemed possible, and the fears that once were gigantic became small compared to the collective vision. He realized that, alone, he walked, but in a group, he flew. And most importantly, he felt something profound. Success is lighter when shared, because the journey is not just about wealth, but about identity, who he becomes in the process. But even though the mastermind was powerful, he discovered that there was a silent ally that needed to be activated for all of this to truly take hold. Imagination. Not as fantasy, but as a creative tool that builds reality before it exists. And it is precisely about this power, the internal workshop where everything is born, that the next topic delves into. Imagination. The invisible workshop where prosperity is shaped before it exists. He always thought that imagining wealth was too much fantasizing, until he discovered that all great achievers imagined before building. Andrew Carnegie envisioned his steel empire before erecting the first structure. Henry Ford visualized his cars before touching a tool. Walt Disney saw entire worlds before a single line existed on paper. And Napoleon Hill said, "Imagination is the workshop of the mind." When he understood this, he realized that his financial life was limited not by what he earned, but by what he could imagine. The mind functions like a projector. What it projects internally creates molds for its external actions. When it visualizes failure, it acts with fear. When it visualizes prosperity, it acts with intention. Imagination is not escape, it's mental rehearsal. It's the brain practicing the future before it happens. Studies show that imagination activates the same areas of the brain as real action. In other words, when it imagines investing wisely, deciding courageously, planning clearly, its brain already begins to behave like someone who is prosperous. To put this tool into practice, he created a 10-minute ritual upon waking. He would close his eyes and imagine his ideal financial life in detail. The feeling of tranquility when opening his bank app, his investments growing month after month, the freedom to choose opportunities without despair. He visualized the environment, the colors, his breathing, his gratitude. He did this daily until his mind began to believe that this was his new reality. And a brain that believes creates pathways to confirm it. He also learned to use his imagination as a strategic tool. Before a negotiation, he imagined himself confident and clear-headed. Before investing, he imagined the positive consequences of well-made decisions. Before studying, he imagined knowledge becoming natural. These micro-rehearsals changed his behavior. He became more attentive, more receptive, more prepared. He imagined first, acted later. And the more he did this, the more he realized that imagination is not a spiritual luxury. It's mental technology. But as he broadened his vision, he realized something essential. Imagining is not enough. It is necessary to combine imagination with faith, that inner certainty that sustains what does not yet exist. Without faith, imagination becomes a dream. With faith, it becomes a blueprint. And it is precisely about this union between inner certainty and mental creation that the next topic delves into. Faith, the mental certainty that transforms imagination into concrete reality. He grew up believing that faith was merely something spiritual, distant from practical life. But when he began to study human behavior and the Bible itself, he discovered something surprising. Faith is a mental technology. Hebrews 11:1 says that faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. In other words, it is creating internal evidence before external evidence exists. And when he understood this, he realized that faith is not wishful thinking. It is internally accepting what has not yet manifested itself. The mind works like this. When you genuinely believe in something, your brain changes its way of operating. You act with more courage, make better choices, and seek opportunities with more clarity. Faith is like a code that unlocks decisions aligned with the future you want to live. Without faith, imagination is loose, without structure. With faith, it becomes an architectural blueprint. That's why millionaires and extremely prosperous people have firm convictions about what they will accomplish long before they actually do it. To train this practical faith, he began using affirmations with emotion, not as empty phrases. He repeated daily, "I manage my wealth wisely. I attract opportunities aligned with my vision. I am faithful to my purpose." But he didn't repeat them robotically. He put feeling, posture, breath into them. Emotion gave life to the declaration. And of course, he aligned this with small actions, investing even when the amount was small, studying even when tired, making decisions even when fear whispered. Faith doesn't negate fear. It just speaks louder. He also understood that faith doesn't grow in theory. It grows in practice. It grows when he acts even without guarantees. It grows when he takes a step further, when he trusts that his consistency will be rewarded. It grows when he looks back and realizes that he has already overcome challenges that he once believed to be impossible. And thus, faith becomes self-built. Each small advance reinforces inner certainty. And the greater the certainty, the more aligned his external life becomes. But as his faith grew stronger, he realized there was still one last silent enemy that could sabotage everything: doubt. Doubt is not a lack of faith. It's interference. And if left unchecked, it corrodes everything he has built mentally. It's like a virus that enters the system. And it is precisely about this internal struggle and how to replace it before it destroys his progress that the next topic explores in depth. Doubt, the silent saboteur that neutralizes faith and blocks prosperity. He always thought doubt was just an inconvenient thought, but he discovered it's far more dangerous than it seems. Doubt acts like quicksand. The more attention he gives it, the more it pulls him in. Doubt doesn't shout, it doesn't make a scene. It whispers. It whispers, "What if it doesn't work out? What if you lose everything? What if you're not capable?" And the problem isn't hearing these whispers, but believing them. Because doubt is skillful. It dresses up as logic. It looks like prudence. It looks like security. But in reality, it's fear in disguise. When doubt creeps in, it cancels out the effect of faith. It's like trying to light a fire while simultaneously throwing water on it. The mind becomes divided, the body becomes indecisive, and actions become weak. And prosperity demands direction, not ambiguity. He realized this when he began making strong affirmations, but then immediately thought, "But will it really work?" This emotional micro-fissure weakened everything. It was like building a structure with excellent materials, but on unstable ground. Nothing held up. To combat doubt, he created a simple ritual. Whenever a thought of insecurity arose, he immediately replaced it with an affirmation of faith. He didn't argue. He didn't debate. He simply switched. For example, when he thought, "I don't know if it will work," he would say, "It works because I'm aligned with the right action." When the thought, "What if it goes wrong?" arose, he would answer, "What if it goes right? And I'm working towards that." This quick redirection prevented doubt from taking root. It was like cutting the weeds before they spread throughout the garden. Another powerful point was understanding that doubt isn't overcome with force, but with consistency. He didn't try to eliminate doubt forever. He simply didn't let it control his life that day. He created a journal of evidence. Every advance, no matter how small, he noted down. A payment received, an investment made, a debt paid off, a goal achieved. Over time, this journal became concrete proof that he was capable. And the doubt, which had previously seemed gigantic, shrank in the face of the evidence of his own progress. But as he overcame his doubt, he realized that this process didn't depend solely on the mind. It also depended on the body. It depended on the energy, the disposition, the vibration with which he faced the day. And he understood that there is a specific emotion capable of accelerating all the laws of prosperity: enthusiasm. And it is precisely on this emotional force, the fuel of manifestation, that the next topic delves. Enthusiasm, the emotional energy that activates manifestation and raises the frequency of prosperity. He discovered that positive thinking is good, having faith is powerful, but nothing compares to the impact of enthusiasm. Enthusiasm isn't superficial excitement, it's inner fire. It's the emotion that transforms a simple affirmation into a decree, that transforms a visualization into a command, that transforms ordinary action into magnetic action. Napoleon Hill said that enthusiasm is the force that vibrates your intention into the universe. And when he understood this, he realized that his words came alive when they were charged with this energy. Enthusiasm is the frequency at which prosperity operates. It doesn't matter if you're starting with little. When you act with enthusiasm, your vibe rises, your vision broadens, your mind expands. Everything flows better. He felt this when he began to affirm with conviction, "I am building my wealth." It wasn't just talking. It was feeling. Feeling his body vibrate, feeling the idea take shape, feeling the future drawing closer. Enthusiasm causes the brain to register that vision as important, and therefore directs focus, courage, and creativity toward achieving it. To cultivate enthusiasm, he created a simple ritual. Before his daily affirmations, he would do a little emotional activation. He would breathe deeply, put on music that raised his energy, or recall moments when he felt strong and capable. This raised his vibration and gave his words more power. Then he would read his affirmations with a firm voice, upright posture, and genuine emotion. This detail, posture, seems small, but it changes everything. The body communicates to the brain that it is already in the desired state, and the brain responds. Furthermore, he began to apply enthusiasm to practical actions. Instead of investing haphazardly, he did so with intention, celebrating each contribution, even the small ones. Instead of paying bills with resentment, he paid them with gratitude for the progress. Instead of studying finance with boredom, he sought out content that inspired him. Enthusiasm transformed "I have to do it" into "I choose to do it." And this simple energetic adjustment changed his productivity, his discipline, and his financial consistency. But as he nurtured his emotion, he realized something fundamental. Enthusiasm without purpose dissipates. For that energy to truly transform into wealth, it needs to be channeled into a plan, a route, a clear destination. And it is precisely about this route, the transformation of enthusiasm into practical, consistent, and guided action, that the next topic delves into. Now that you understand how the mind works and how it creates, attracts, or repels wealth, the question that really matters is, what are you going to do with this knowledge? Because it's no use just watching, agreeing, and going back to the same old routine. Nothing changes until you change. Prosperity doesn't respond to what you wish for. It responds to what you practice. Think for a second. How many opportunities have you already missed because you sabotaged yourself before even trying? How many years have you let doubt decide for you? Today you have something very few people have: awareness. And awareness is power. From here you can continue living on autopilot, or you can take the wheel of your own mind. What thought will you choose to feed tomorrow morning? What small action will prove to yourself that you are not just consuming content, you are building a new life? Wealth begins in the mind, but only takes shape when you decide to act. And I want you to reflect deeply on this. What insight struck you the most today? What belief have you realized you need to let go of? What mental habit will you start today, not Monday? Leave a comment. It's not just about engagement. It's about truly committing to your transformation. And if you want to keep progressing in this, subscribe to the channel now and turn on notifications. Here, you'll never receive superficial content. You'll learn to think, act, and thrive in a way that no one has ever taught you. The next video might be exactly the turning point your mind is ready for.